We're with Ukraine for as long as it takes. What a totally empty statement. That means nothing. As long as what takes? That's oxygen for the Kremlin. Crimea is the only thing that matters. If Ukraine liberates Crimea, then it's over.
If Russia attacks again, US should step in.
Yeah, we've been prepared to do that since 1949. I see everything moving positively for Ukraine. I see no bright spots on the horizon for Russia. None. Except.
Ben, happy to have you with us. And first of all, let me ask you a simple question. Will Ukraine win?
Yes, of course Ukraine is going to win.
But we see that our counteroffensive is not that fast. Of course, we in Ukraine we do believe that it leads to victory. But does everyone in Europe and in the US believe that Ukraine is definitely winning?
So I think people misunderstand what the counteroffensive is. It's not just what we see on the ground and fighting in trenches and minefields. That's only the land component of a much larger, very sophisticated counteroffensive, what NATO calls multi-domain. That's what Ukraine is doing. Air, land, sea, cyber, information, special forces, all of these things are being done, integrated in a way that gives Ukraine the initiative and also puts enormous pressure on the Russian general staff. I would say that the Ukrainian general staff is running rings around the Russian general staff. This attack on Crimea over the last 4 weeks, all of these things together, this was not a coincidence. This was a very sophisticated approach to remove radar, to attack and destroy a logistics maintenance site, and then to destroy the headquarters of the Black Sea Fleet. This is all part of making Crimea untenable for the Russian forces. That's the key to victory.
I remember, and you definitely were asked about that. I remember that earlier on you were much more optimistic. There were prognoses that by the end of this year, Ukraine will retake southern territories and probably Crimea.
I believed that Ukraine would liberate Crimea by the end of this summer. But as you will recall, I always had the caveat, if the West provides everything that's needed. We didn't. And so I was wrong in my estimation that the U.S. administration and the German government would have decided to give to Ukraine the long-range weapons that it needed, the capabilities that were needed. I was wrong. I was sure that my president by now would have said, we want Ukraine to win. And for them to win, they need all of this. And we haven't done that yet.
Of course, we cannot dig into president's head, but he definitely based his assessment on a complex of different factors. How do you see what is preventing Western leaders, including President Biden, to provide Ukraine the needed weaponry?
Yeah, my president has done a very good job on in so many ways to help keep the 50-plus nations together. And of course, what the U.S. has provided is not inconsequential, but he has failed to do what I think is the most important task, which is to describe what is our objective. What do we want the outcome to be? Instead, what I hear is, we're with Ukraine for as long as it takes. What a totally empty statement. That means nothing. As long as what takes. And so my president has got to say, we want Ukraine to win. We want Ukraine to eject Russia back to the 1991 borders.
What is the reason? Is he just afraid, or it's a different matter?
I think that not only him, but people around him, and these are good, smart, hardworking, intelligent people, but most of them are the same ones that were wrong about Russia during the Obama administration. And so they haven't changed their thinking that, number one, that Russia could even be defeated.
They don't believe it.
And then number two, they don't know, they worry about escalation, of course. I think excessive worry, but they worry. Then number three, I think they're not sure what happens when Ukraine has catastrophic success and Russian forces are defeated, and then maybe the regime collapses. What happens? I think those are the things that are in their mind, and they can't or haven't answered that yet. To me, it shows a complete lack of understanding of war, a lack of understanding of Ukraine, and a lack of understanding of Russia.
So, do they believe that Russia can be defeated?
I do. I don't think they do.
What is the reason? They believe that it's that strong, or are they just afraid of what?
I think that, well, again, these are smart, intelligent, hardworking, good people, all right? But I think many of them have always had this idea that somehow the Soviet Union, now Russia, is just too big and it's too powerful, and they can just keep absorbing punishment, and they have thousands of nuclear weapons. I think that's the image. And so the idea that Ukraine could somehow defeat Russia, for them is can't get their head around it. For me, it is obvious that Ukraine is going to defeat Russia. We know from history that war is a test of will, and it's a test of logistics. And I see everything moving positively for Ukraine. I see no bright spots on the horizon for Russia, none, except when they hear us talk about, we hope Ukraine can have a strong negotiating settlement, or come on, Ukraine, let Russia have Crimea for the sake of peace. This kind of nonsense, that's oxygen for the Kremlin.
Regarding Crimea, do you believe that in current situation, when the West and the United States do not provide to Ukraine all the needed weapons, but provide some of it, is that possible to retake Crimea militarily?
That to me, that only prolongs the conflict, and so many more people get killed, so much more destruction, when it really could be over much faster if the U.S. and Germany in particular would say, we want Ukraine to win. Here, this is what you need, take this. Crimea is the only thing that matters. If Ukraine liberates Crimea, then it's over. The Donbass, I don't think Russia cares a drop about Donbass, except because it is the land bridge from Rostov to Crimea. I think that's the only reason. They've done nothing to improve Donetsk and Luhansk since they've controlled it, nothing, except grab men and put them in the military. They've done nothing to improve those occupied territories.
And even Crimea, they need it as a military base that lets them to control
the Black Sea. Yeah, and I think that the Ukrainian general staff, which has been brilliant in this war, understands that Ukraine will never be safe or secure as long as Russia occupies Crimea. They'll never be able to really rebuild their economy as long as Russia occupies Crimea and can disrupt shipping from Odessa, Kherson, Mykolaiv, or block ships coming in and out of Azov. Even after Kherson and Berdansk are liberated, the Russians will still block Azov Sea. So that's why I don't see how Ukraine can accept a solution, and nor why any of us should push a solution where Russia keeps Crimea.
What do we need militarily? You refer to long-range missiles. Probably it is not the only. And let me clarify my question. I remember well that in the beginning of this big war, we have heard plenty of times that we need tanks. Then we will have several hundred tanks, and it will change a situation. Tanks are being provided, and it appeared that it's not enough because the Russians can use Lancets and minefields.
Okay, so this has been the problem. There's been so much emphasis on specific platforms, F-16, ATACMS, tanks, Patriot, ... All of these are important, but there is no one weapon that changes everything. It's the effects of a combination of weapons that are properly employed. And so that's why I prefer to talk about capabilities. What capability does Ukraine need to win? So you have to back up. Well, how do they win? Ukraine wins by liberating Crimea. So what do you need to liberate Crimea? You need to have forces that can isolate Crimea, cut the land bridge, cut Kerch Bridge, and then make Crimea untenable for Russian forces. Make it where the Black Sea Fleet cannot stay in Sevastopol. The Russian Air Force cannot stay in Saki. Russian logistics cannot stay in Zhankoy. For that, you need long-range weapons that can hit every day Sevastopol, Saki, every day, so that they have to leave. I heard the SACEUR, General Cavoli recently said that precision can defeat mass. The only advantage the Russians have is mass. That's it. And they don't care how many of their people get killed. So you have to neutralize mass by destroying headquarters, destroying logistics, destroying artillery. You need long-range precision fires to do that. So whether it's a ATACMS, Taurus, Storm Shadow, Gray Eagle drone, ground-launched small diameter bomb, I don't care. You need that capability to hit those things. If you do that and you have enough, then the Russians cannot stay there. But I do believe it could be over next year if the U.S. Look, Putin is going to keep doing this until he realizes he is lost. When it's in his head, I've lost or I'm losing, then he'll have to stop and he'll change the narrative.
Or he can use a nuclear weapon.
Okay, let me come to that. So the way we make him realize he's lost is when 50 nations say, including the United States, Germany, UK, France, we want Ukraine to win. It's our policy that Ukraine is going to win. Then when he sees us do all this, then he knows. But right now, he sees that we are not committed to Ukraine winning. So he just has to hang on. Yes, of course, you have to take the nuclear threat serious. They have thousands of nuclear weapons. He doesn't care how many people die, including his own people. He doesn't care. So why would he use a nuclear weapon? I don't think he will. There's no benefit. There's zero benefit to Russia if they use a nuclear weapon. Ukraine has already said, we're not stopping. And my president has said, if you use nuclear weapon, catastrophic consequence for Russia. I think they believe him. President Xi has said, do not use nuclear weapons. And I think the people around Putin are looking at him and saying, he's 70 years old. What about their life after him? So I'm not so sure that everybody in Moscow or St. Petersburg would support the idea of him using a nuclear weapon. And of course, we're talking about tactical nuclear weapons, not strategic. Tactical nuclear weapons require a lot of people to follow orders to do things. And we would know if they were beginning that process. So I think for the Russians, their nuclear weapons really are most effective when they don't use them, because they cause all of us to hesitate.
So it means that even if Putin becomes that much crazy that he decides that, well, he's 70 and he does not care, we have to make a final strike, some people will stop this process?
I think so. And what we should be doing, we should be, all the people that are around, we know who they are. I mean, I think Ukrainians know who are the people that keep Putin in power, right? They should see their face in newspaper, on billboards, everywhere, saying, we know that you have influence. And you can be sure after this is all over, you can decide now, are you going to continue to enable Putin? Or do you want to be sitting in a box like in the Nuremberg trial in The Hague? So don't allow people to feel like they can do things with impunity as if there's no consequence for them if they continue to support Vladimir Putin or help him do this.
To finalize, let's talk about NATO shortly. I would say that we have lost in Vilnius, unfortunately. The invitation could be provided, but it wasn't. Do you believe that it's possible to have an invitation of Ukraine to join NATO, or let's say at Washington summit?
It is possible. And in fact, I think it's more possible now than it was a year ago. I think the language has changed, that the mood sort of changed at Vilnius, even though we didn't get the invitation that we had hoped for Ukraine. It's like we've gotten over a hurdle, emotionally and intellectually. So I think now what we've got to do is separate invitation from accession.
Yeah.
In Vilnius, the conversation was all about if Ukraine is invited to join NATO, we'll immediately be in a war. No.
That's not true.
Of course it's not. But yet that came from the American National Security Advisor. So we have got to work hard on the language to make it clear. I mean, look at Sweden. Sweden was invited over 18 months ago. And they're still months away. So there's an example already of a country that was invited, and they're on the path, which would be a very important signal to Ukraine, but also to Russia, that Russia does not get to choose. And then we work on the accession part.
Some people say that even if, or not if, but when Ukraine wins, for the United States, maybe it's not the best option to provide Ukraine with finally membership, because that means that if Russia attacks again, US should step in.
Yeah, we've been prepared to do that since 1949 when any member was attacked. So the best way to make sure Russia doesn't attack is for Ukraine to be in NATO. I think Russia, as terrible as they are, they do not want to commit suicide, which would be an attack on NATO. That would be suicide for them. And so I think my country needs to get behind this. This will improve security and stability in Europe much better than what it is now, by having Russia see that because of what they've done, they now have NATO from Finland to Turkey, all the way, and in the Black Sea. That we need to have a strategy for the Black Sea region. Stop talking about Ukraine like it's an island, but instead talk about Ukraine as part of a region that is strategically important for the West. And Ukraine being a member of NATO, Ukraine, Romania, Bulgaria, Turkey, and then who knows, Moldova and Georgia, at least inside the EU. That would change the security dynamic historically, and for generations.
And you believe that it will happen?
Yes.
Thank you very much for the interview. Thank you very much for believing in Ukraine, and let's hope that it will happen sooner than later. Ukraine will definitely win.
They will.